to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. I am your host, Michael Leva, joined by a very special guest today, Jeff Ermann, the founder of InsideMDSports.com. And you can follow him on Twitter, social media, at Jeff_Ermann. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, and we're going to talk about the two players from the University of Maryland that the Miami Dolphins took in the draft a little bit over a week ago, and with Jordan Phillips and Dante Jr. But first, before that, a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's show, Caneswear. Everyone go to the website, caneswear.com, for the very best Miami Dolphins apparel on the internet. If you're in South Florida, visit their store at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida. But caneswear.com is the website. They will ship internationally as well for the best and most affordable Miami Dolphins apparel. All right, so the Dolphins in the draft, their scout, whoever scouted the Maryland players, it must have got a little bit of a raise because they took two players from the University of Maryland. And let's first talk about Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle. He still had a year left. Was there any talk of him heading back to school? Or was it always thought he's going to turn pro after this year and he's going to go in the draft?
It seemed like one of those 50-50 ones where you don't really know until a little later in the game. Once the season ended, it started to come out that he was very likely to go to the draft, which, you can't blame him. He's a guy who survived a really tough upbringing and has, went to Tennessee first, didn't work out there, transferred to Maryland and has persevered. And, he was ready to make his move, as many guys are at that stage.
Yep, and he went in round 5, and in the lead up to the draft, all the quote-unquote experts, the Mel Kipers and all those, Todd McShay's, I saw him in like most of the mocks and stuff like late round 3, round 4, ends up in round 5. Is that what you were hearing in the lead up, that he might go a little bit earlier than what he went, or was round 5 kind of expected, you think?
Yeah, I kind of thought round 3 or 4. It sounds like it was a pretty deep draft for defensive tackles, so that might have affected him a little bit. But, as it started to get to the later rounds, I was thinking someone's going to get a heck of an undrafted free agent at this point. And then obviously he went off the board to Miami. But originally, I think most thought he was around a third round kind of guy.
Yep. And just like you said, he started at Tennessee. He didn't play too much there. Transferred to Maryland as a sophomore. Started 11 games. When he got to Maryland, did he make an immediate impact as a player, or did he sort of grow into that role as a starter? And was it like a slow, I don't even know the term, or did he come on the scene and just sort of, this guy's a real player, he's a big time guy, he's going to help us a lot?
Yeah, definitely the latter. He was immediately one of their best defensive linemen. The hype started to grow a little bit right out of the first camp that he was there. So it was known pretty quickly that he was going to be one of their top defensive linemen. It was a unit that definitely needed help when he arrived, and they play a nose tackle a lot of the time. He was built for that with his size and strength. So, he was clearly one of their best, even though it didn't show up in terms of sacks or a lot of huge highlight plays. He was one of their most consistent defensive linemen right off the jump.
Yep, and for his style of play, looking at the numbers as an outsider, not many, if any, sacks per se. Is he just a big son of a gun you put in the middle of the line, stop the run stuffer, take on multiple guys, open things up for linebackers and stuff? Or does he have a little bit of a pass rush game?
I think he has a little more pass rush game than he showed at Maryland. I think he was coached in a read and react kind of way. We didn't really go after the quarterback that much. He's never probably going to be, a 9 or 10 sack a year guy, but I think he'll pick up some sacks in the NFL. Obviously, 0 in 2 years in college tells you that, that's not his biggest strength. His biggest strength is his strength. He's one of the strongest guys, was one of the strongest guys at the combine. I think he did more reps on the bench than any other defensive tackle. So he made Bruce Feldman's annual freaks list of the top freaks in college football athletically. So yeah, he could prove to be a little more of a pass rusher, but he's going to be more of a ox at the line who plugs holes.
And that's what the Miami Dolphins need, hence why they took Grant in round 1 out of Michigan, and then in round 5, which was only the 3rd pick in the draft in round 5, they took another tackle because they're a little weak up front. So he's going to get a golden opportunity here to be on the field probably a lot because they are so thin at that position. So I think he landed in a great spot, even though if he went a round or 2 later than he was maybe hoping, I think he did land with the right team in the right spot to get on the field right away because Miami is so lacking up front. They got Zach Sealer, they got Grant in round 1 out of Michigan, and really now Jordan Phillips, and there's not much else.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for him, and he's one of those physically and mentally mature kids who should be able to take on a role immediately rather than, having to be brought along as like an apprentice for a year or 2.
Yep. Then later in round 5, a few picks later, they selected Dante Trader Jr., safety, Maryland, 4-year player at Maryland. He committed in both football and lacrosse. And from the research I did, he only played football as a freshman, and then after that, he played both sports. Was he a top lacrosse guy, or did he come for football? And yes, I also play lacrosse, or was he a top lacrosse guy who also played football? Was it split 50-50? Like, what was his primary sport coming out of high school?
He was higher ranked in lacrosse. He was a top 5 recruit in the country, actually.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, an elite level lacrosse recruit. Only played it a little bit in college. As you know, it's really hard to play football and another sport.
Yeah.
Did pretty well for himself when he did play it. But, if you're a top level athlete, your career potential is obviously way higher on the football side. So he chose to focus on that. But that does show, some of his athleticism. There's not too many guys who can be a top 5 recruit in one sport and be drafted also, in football.
Yeah, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he was also named the Maryland MVP on that side of the ball after the 2024 season. And he was also named a team captain. So MVP on the on his side of the field and also team captain. Is the best way to talk about Trader, is he sort of like an undersized guy who just sort of has instincts and skills to play the position, but not the biggest, not the fastest?
Yeah, I'd say so. And he makes up a little bit of that in versatility and smarts. Very smart, high character kid. One of the most, the Dolphins got 2 of the most high character kids on the roster at Maryland. If any fans want to learn more about Jordan Phillips, they should look up. He did an interview on Glenn Clark Radio, if you Google that, where he talked about his childhood and how NIL was not a big thing for him, and he just wanted to, do the right things. It's a great interview. Anyways, they got 2 of the highest character kids. Trader was team captain, as you mentioned, one of their best defensive backs for the past several years. Probably not a guy who's going to be a star in the NFL, but definitely a guy who has the athleticism and the work ethic to stick and help a team.
Yeah, and I think for Miami, especially this offseason, trying to add those guys who are high character is something that they're probably that they are going to focus on, because everything that's going on right now with Hill and this will probably be his last year in Miami. There's a lot of off the field stuff there with Tyreek Hill. This whole Ramsey story, which is still a little murky, but something's happening where he won't be here. And probably 1 month from today, he'll probably be gone on another team after we get past June 1st. So adding high character guys to not just help on the field, but help behind the scenes in the locker room with the culture, change things, I think is a big deal for them. And I think with Grant, who's also a very high character guy, and with these 2 kids here out of Maryland, that's going to go a long way, because following football, talent is always reign supreme on the field. That's a big deal. But also what's happening behind the scenes, which fans don't see and stuff, you got to have a good locker room. You have to have a good group of guys. And I think adding guys, high character guys like this, will help Miami down the road for sure.
Oh, absolutely. People just look at the stats and the highlights, and they don't think much about the intangibles that matter. But these are two great kids that Miami got. I don't think you'll ever have to worry about either one of them. And, they could be guys that develop into reliable starters.
Yep. And for Trader, I think his best bet, obviously, right away is going to be on special teams. And in Miami, they lost all 4 starters in their secondary. They lost their starting 2 corners once they traded Ramsey. And they also lost their 2 safeties as well. So they're looking to replace everybody. And they really didn't sign anyone of consequence in March in free agency in that period. So I think for Trader, he's going to have a golden opportunity to where he could turn some heads and maybe get on the field earlier than he would have with some other teams just because of the situation in Miami. So he's got that going for him as well. I want to ask you about Maryland football in general here. Last year was a rough year for them, 1-8 in conference, 4-8 overall. Obviously, in the Big Ten, it's tough. But there are the upsides of the Big Ten. You get lots of money from the TV deal. You're in the Big Ten. You're not worrying like schools in the ACC and stuff of what's going to happen with the conference. But you also have to put up with the Ohio States, Michigan, Oregon, USC's, and Penn States of the world. What's the state right now of Maryland football heading into 2025?
Yeah, you said it perfectly, Mike. That's the trade-off. You have long-term stability, financially with the Big Ten, obviously, that very few other schools can find unless you're in the SEC or Big Ten. On the flip side, it means you're playing against incredibly tough competition every week, especially when you're not a historical football school like Maryland. They really struggled early after the Big Ten move. Mike Loxley came in and revamped the program, went to bowl games and won bowl games 3 years in a row for the first time in the program history. And then they fell off last year, went 1-8 in the Big Ten. So this is a vital year for him to bounce back. I think the thing the fans are really waiting for the most part is to get those wins over the elite teams, the kind that get the fan base coming back next week because they saw you beat Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan. Those have eluded them for the most part. They've had a lot of close calls. So I think that has been the biggest thing, the biggest drawback so far. But, in this day and age of college sports, when it's just all about financial survival, they got a pretty good life draft.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be in one of those 2 big spots in the SEC or in the Big Ten. They have a seat at the table there. They have the long-term stability. They're going to be financially well off. But yeah, they were like 8-5, 8-5, 7-6. Then you throw in USC, Washington, Oregon, and UCLA. They have it down here, 4-8. I can see why the conference got that much tougher. Mike Loxley, he's had success there. Is he on the hot seat here heading into 2025, or is he safe and is he loved by the people of Maryland?
I'd say his seat is warm. It's very hard to say because they don't have an athletic director right now. Their athletic director, Damon Evans, left for SMU about 2 months ago, and they won't make a hire for probably another month. So,
okay.
We don't know who that is and how they'll view Mike and his performance. But, he could definitely help himself by having a bounce back season after as rough as last year was. You have to win back the fans. And so there's a decent amount of pressure there to win.
Yeah, I think I saw he's 16-40 inside the Big Ten, which you take with a grain of salt because Maryland, kind of like Rutgers, they're in a tougher spot compared to these other programs when it comes to football. So you do take that record with a grain of salt, knowing that they're up against it. From an NIL perspective, are they in a very strong place? I know some schools you would think that are in a strong spot right now. They aren't, and some schools that you wouldn't think are. Where are they from an NIL spot compared to other like-sized type of schools?
That's been a challenge for them. They don't have that big, heavy-hitting football booster.
What happened to the Under Armour money? What happened to
Under Armour? Under Armour's been one of the few saving graces for them. But Kevin Plank can't do it all himself. He has his own concerns, including his stock price continually declining. So they don't, it's more of a basketball school. When basketball needs money, they usually can raise it. Football, there's not nearly as many of those diehard, wealthy alums. So their hope was that, this House settlement would level the playing field, and everyone would probably have, 12 to 13 million to spend on football, and that would be that. But, it hasn't gone through yet. And so NIL is still being allowed as basically pay for play everywhere. So you have some of these schools, I read an article yesterday about Texas having a $40 million roster.
That's crazy.
Texas, obviously, it's not in the Big Ten, but there's Ohio State is similar to Texas. Penn State has a ton of resources, Michigan. So until they do away with just free-for-all NIL and go strictly to a revenue-sharing model, it's going to continue to be a challenge for Maryland.
Yeah, I had on a reporter who covers Texas, and I asked about that number. He goes, well, I don't know if it's that. I go, but it's probably close. He goes, yeah. And then the report about Quinn Ewers also taken by the Dolphins, where, if he went back to school and stuff, he could have got $8 million possibly in NIL. He goes, well, that number's probably right. Okay, so what? It's 5 or 4? It's like, still, that's like creme de la creme. Look, most schools can't pay that to one player, and you're talking like a handful, like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State's probably in that mix, Notre Dame, schools that a school like Maryland recruits against, plays against. If they have the resources to pay one player $4 million just to play quarterback, roughly, or 5 or 6, that's tough to compete against. That's an uphill battle that it's wild to think where we are. It's wild.
Yeah, they had several players poached off of their roster, several longtime starters poached off of their roster a couple weeks ago, which some of them were kind of surprising, including one, a defensive lineman named Levon Johnson, who's one of their best, young defensive linemen. He went to Texas, probably got 500,000 or 600,000, whereas Maryland probably, I don't know what they could have paid him, 2, maybe 3. So, it's definitely a problem, and it's a problem for the sport, in my opinion, and for fan interest, which is going to continue to erode until they figure this out.
Yep, I agree. Jeff, thanks so much for a few moments of your time today. Everyone, please be sure to read Jeff's work at InsideMDSports.com and follow him on Twitter and social media at Jeff_Ermann. Jeff, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey guys, Mike here from DolphinsTalk.com. Just want to thank you for watching this video today. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this video. And also just thank you in general. I know you have a lot of other podcast options out there these days, whether it's with the Miami Dolphins or about the Miami Dolphins, and with non-Miami Dolphins podcast stuff like true crime, politics, NBA, Major League Baseball. We do appreciate the support you guys provide us, and we do thank you for watching our content. We appreciate it more than you'll ever know. So thank you so much. Just want to say thank you. And also, don't forget to sign up for our Patreon service. Go to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. And for just $3 a month, you will get more Miami Dolphins coverage and shows. Patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. Thank you again, and everyone have a great day.